Tim Ballard is with us, and I want to tell you the story of how this book, why this book is important to me, and why it should be important to you. About 2 years ago, correct me if I'm wrong, Pat, wasn't it about 2 years ago? It was before we went. It was before we went to Israel, maybe a year and a half ago. I went to some of the biggest scholars on American history, and Peter Lilback, who is a George Washington. He probably knows more and has more record of what George Washington said and wrote about when it concerns God than anybody else. He's probably the biggest name in George Washington religious information. And I called a few of these professors and researchers up, and I said, listen, I have a theory. I have a theory that we made a covenant, starting really with Columbus. Really, then again, it really took shape with the Pilgrims. They honored that covenant. That gave us the generation of the founders. And with Whitefield coming over, he laid the groundwork to really cement it. And George Washington and the founders made a covenant with God. And it is the reason why we were founded, why we were protected, and why Israel was established. And we won't make it because now we've accomplished that one task. The question is now, are we over? Because I believe all the founders saw it. They were laying the foundation. Are we over, or do we renew the covenant? Every single one of them said, you won't be able to prove that. Except for Peter Lilback. Peter Lilback said, Glenn, I can't think of anything that says that that's true. And I said, Peter, would you be willing to look into it? Just look into it. He called me 3 months later, and he said, Glenn, I can't believe it. There's a ton of evidence just from George Washington that that's true, that that's what he believed. He actually published a little teeny book on the founders and Israel based on that theory. So now fast forward, Pat, when was it? Fall of last year? Someplace, because we were still in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
I hear about somebody who's working on the covenant, the founding fathers. I hear about this. Separately, we get a phone call. Pat gets a phone call from somebody who knows you and says, Pat, you guys have got to get together with Tim Ballard because you won't believe what he's found. It's exactly the same thing. You've done all the homework. You've done all of the research. This is not your field of expertise. This isn't really even what you were setting out to do when you were going to write a book, right?
That's right.
What were you? Bring the microphone into you. What exactly was your goal of when you started to write this book, or when you started to do the research? What were you doing?
My background is in kind of the foreign policy apparatus. I work for the United States government. I do a lot of work overseas, and I was fascinated by the power for good that the United States is. I work in child exploitation, and I get to witness the greatness of this nation in liberating the oppressed overseas and abroad. And I thought, I'm gonna, it kind of informed my research into the foreign policy side of things. And so I wanted to look into that. I thought, hey, I'm going to write a couple chapters on the founding to kind of set this up. Well, those couple chapters turned into a whole book because I was absolutely shocked at what I found. The question I had is, what is the power for good? I mean, 200 years, this country's an infant, 200 years old or so. Why are we so powerful? What I found was that word, the covenant. The founders knew of this covenant. It's a covenant attached to the covenants of ancient Israel. They knew that power, they tapped into that power, and it worked.
We were talking yesterday off air about the prayer at Valley Forge, where George Washington gets down on his knees, and he always prayed looking up. He always was praying up to God. And he was very, very humble. And here he is in Valley Forge. He goes off into the woods by himself, and he kneels down in the snow. He always knelt when he prayed, and he spoke his prayer. Unbeknownst to him, he thought he was alone. There was someone who was on the side of the British watching him.
Isaac Potts. That's right. And he sees this, he feels this power. He feels the power of this covenant that Washington is making, this connection with heaven. He runs home to his wife and says, "We're on the side of George Washington. I'm changing sides because we're going to win this."
He's like, it's over. For Great Britain, it's over.
That's right.
You should have heard this man pray. And if this guy is praying, if this is he's using the power of God. It's over. It's an amazing story. Okay, so explain what the covenant is exactly.
The covenant, well, really, we look at the Old Testament. The Old Testament establishes a covenant. God says to Israel, "I will be your God and you will be my people." And he promises them liberty and protection, prosperity, if they adhere to him, if they turn their hearts to him. And there's this story that develops in the Old Testament, a fascinating story. This story continues in the promised land of America.
Do you have any doubt in your mind that Columbus, when he first went to Spain, he was so arrogant he didn't understand the covenant? But the second time when he went, after living with the monks for a while, he was humble enough to understand the covenant and got it when he first came over.
He got it. And all you have to do is look in his book of prophecies, his diary, he named it this. Mm-hmm. He understood things so profound. He understood the connection to Israel. He believed that his discovery of this new world, what he thought was the Indies, he believed that this was going to create something, start a chain of events that would actually
reestablish Israel.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And that's exactly the same thing that the Pilgrims felt.
Exactly. The Pilgrims get here. They call themselves the New Israel. John Winthrop gives the speech of American literature, the City on the Hill speech. That's an invocation of the covenant. And he says, in his writings, it's a capital C, he puts the covenant, the covenant. We're making a covenant. We're taking out a commission, he says. And he repeats the same pattern. I mean, it's like reading the Old Testament all over again, reading American history. They name their towns after Israelite towns. Salem, for example, a derivative from Jerusalem. They name their children Hebrew names. They invoke the covenant, and the miracles happen. The miracles immediately fall upon them.
One of my favorite stories is George Washington makes this covenant, tells the American people, make the covenant on this day. I've asked people, and I don't know if you remember, but I've asked, on this day, fast and pray, make the covenant with God. I'm fasting, praying. I'd love for you to join. Pray for the country. Make the covenant with God, because that's what changed everything. Now, he did it twice. He did it here, and then he did it again in July, right?
That's
Was
right.
it July? Yeah.
That's right.
Made it in July. Tell me about, and I find this is the first evidence that it is starting, it has an effect. If you read history and you read the journals, on either side, the Battle of Long Island is the first sign of the miracles of God.
And it is an unbelievable miracle. I mean, look at this. George Washington, he's a farmer. He's got citizen soldiers with they barely know how to shoot a gun. And they're going up against the world superpower. It was the largest naval fleet ever sent from one nation to another nation to that time in history. What's he thinking? How in the world is he going to do this thing? He crosses the East River onto Long Island, and they have their first major battle. Well, the Americans get routed. And the British think this is over. We're gonna win this thing. They're laughing as the colonists are running back towards Manhattan for safety. A miracle happens.
One of the reasons why they're laughing is because they know they have British warships in the river behind the U.S. troops. So as Washington is coming in, the British warships are coming down the river, and they're going to meet Washington from behind. So they'll slaughter, because they have them surrounded, they'll slaughter them from both sides.
It's the ultimate trap.
Right.
It's over. This revolution's over. Washington tells his commanders, we're going to cross the river. They say, how are you going to do this thing? Just trust me. We're going to do it. When night falls, we're going to do this thing. Night falls, and with that night comes a enormous windstorm that pushes these British ships out of the way, and Washington starts making the crossing. And then the wind shifts westerly to help facilitate this exodus, if you will. And then what's happening? The sun's going to come up. It's going to expose this scheme, and the British land troops will see it. It'll be over. What happens? David McCullough explains it better than anyone I've found. As the sun comes up, a pea soup fog drops down right over where Washington's crossing. Not so much on the Long Island side or the New York, Manhattan side, But right where Washington's crossing.
They all say in their journals, nowhere else on the island, nowhere else in the area, just over Washington's troops.
And they make the escape. 20 minutes after they get to the other side, the fog dissipates, and the British are standing there with their hands in the air. What on earth just happened? Now, I want to say something else about May 17th. I just found this. May 17th, John Witherspoon, an underrated founding father, who was one of the signers of the Declaration. On May 17th, he gave us a speech to his congregation. And he said, "We will win this war because the grand artist will utilize the elements." And I kid you not, I'm not making this up. He said, God Almighty will send an unforeseen fog to halt the operations of the enemy. May 17th, the very day Washington's fasting and praying for that very miracle, the fog comes. Absolutely stunning. And this is just one of, I don't know how many experiences that follow this pattern.
Okay, so we're going to take a quick break and then we'll come back. You contend that I contend that we broke the covenant.
Yes.
And that it can be made again. You contend it's really not that hard, right?
We can reactivate the covenant. Absolutely.
Okay. Back in just a second with Timothy Ballard. The name of the book is The Covenant, One Nation Under God.
The American Covenant.
Okay. All right.
Well, it's the Covenant.
The Covenant?
Yeah.
The Covenant, One Nation Under God. I think you were reading an early version of it.
I think so.
The Covenant, One Nation Under God. Is it available everywhere?
It's on. It's at Amazon right now.
Okay.
Legendslibrary.com.
Okay. And I believe we have links also at glennbeck.com. Grab this book. You'll learn so much about history, and it all makes sense. When you read it, you're like, oh, my gosh. It's what I've been saying for about a year and a half now. It's not that hard. It's really not that hard. Well, there's no way to win. Exactly what George Washington and the founders knew. There's no way to win here, gang. You're outnumbered. There's no way to win. Yes, there is. Exactly the way Washington won. Exactly the same way. Using the same firepower. It is the only way to win. The Covenant, One Nation Under God. Today is the 17th, the day that Washington begged the American people, make the covenant. Make the covenant. At least start the journey and learn what the covenant is, historically speaking. It's an amazing, amazing ride. We'll give that to you here a little bit more here with Timothy Ballard in just a second. Timothy Ballard is the author of the new book, The Covenant, One Nation Under God, America's Sacred Connection to Ancient Israel. And it is stunning when you tie history together and you really look at what, not somebody's opinion, but you look at their own words and the pattern of American history. It is always the same. We connect with God, we renew this covenant, and there's this moment of brilliance that moves us forward, and then we get fat and lazy, and it goes away, and then there's a flash of brilliance, and it happens every single time. It happened in the American Revolution. I contend we started to break the covenant about 1830, maybe a little bit before that, and the covenant wasn't really, it wasn't strong enough because of, we still had the blood of slavery on our hands, and it started to fall apart. But it was the Christian movement, the covenant again, that brought us forward with Abraham Lincoln. It's what saved us.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. Yeah.
Before we move forward, I want to go to the past. First, let's go to the ancient past.
Yeah, Tim, you say that almost every prophet of old, like Old Testament prophets, prophesied, foresaw America. I don't think a lot of people believe that.
Yeah, that's right. That's not a super popular idea.
No.
I hear a lot that America
doesn't exist.
It doesn't
Nowhere
exist in the Bible. Therefore, it's going to disappear off the face. You know what? I have a very different idea, a very different theory. I believe that these ancient prophets knew of the promised land of America. I believe that, there's all sorts of prophecies about who the lost tribes would be and where they would go. And really, you need to read the book to get the whole context. I won't be able to do it in a quick interview. But I believe, and I believe the evidence is strong, that God led migrations out of Israel, and that he led them to the promised land of America. This was another exodus of sorts.
The Pilgrims believed it. Columbus believed it. All of them believed they were completing the journey that Moses started. All of them.
Yes.
All of them.
Absolutely. And they called when George Washington came to town, they called him their Moses.
Yeah.
Their Joshua. This was a theme that, this isn't so much my idea as it was the Pilgrims' idea.
This goes to Bruce Feiler's book. Remember Bruce Feiler's
American Prophet?
Yes.
Awesome book.
Yeah, awesome book.
Yes.
And here's a guy who's Jewish who says, look at the role of Moses. Every single time in American history, it's Moses. It is the completion. The Statue of Liberty is Moses. It is. She's holding the two tablets of the law. It's Moses breaking the chains of slavery. That's what that is.
And Bruce's book is also complemented by another book. I don't know if you heard of the book called The Harbinger by Jonathan Cahn.
I have heard of it. I don't think I've read it.
Best-selling book. Him and I have been talking this week. He says the same thing. He's also he's a Messianic Jew, runs the Jerusalem Center. He has a ministry. Unbelievable book. Says the exact same thing that I'm saying. The covenant has been extended from Israel, from ancient Israel, to America.
If you look at the arc of history, there had to be a plan to restore Israel, and it's my contention that we were that piece. We were that plan. We've done it. Now the question is, we've done our job. Are we done as a nation? More in a second.
Glenn Beck.
Mercury.
Glenn Beck.
888-727-BECK.
We have Timothy Ballard on. He is the author of a book called The Covenant. He'll be on with me tonight on GBTV, and we'll get into a lot more specifics. And this is really important. And look, we have lost stations. We have lost, we've lost friends. You name it, because I really truly believe that God is the answer. I don't care what religion you are. God's the answer. It's the only way out. George Washington knew it. We can play the little PC game all you want, but it's not going to change the answer. And because I truly believe it, I'll say it. And if it means that, that's the last thing you ever hear from me, okay, that's the last thing you ever hear from me. It's the truth. It's the truth. April 30th is a very important day. Today is a very important day in history, May 17th. This is the day that George Washington said, make a covenant with God. America, please get on your knees and make a covenant for divine protection for this American experiment, because we're never going to win. And he said, fast and pray. I've asked you in the past if you would join us on this day, May 17th, and fast and pray for the one specific reason. Please, we'll be your people. We'll turn our hearts to you if you'll just protect us. We'll do what you say if you please protect us. That's the covenant that George Washington was talking about. Now, Timothy Ballard has the book out, The Covenant, and it is a theory that you're not going to get anyplace else. And it's really, you weren't even looking for this, were you?
I was not. No.
It's not really even a theory. It's theory that we can restore it, I guess. I believe we can. But it's not theory. It's historic fact on this.
It's their words and their actions. I'm speaking of the founders. Absolutely.
So tell me about April 30th. Why is April 30th an important day?
April 30th should be a national holiday. April 30th was a day of covenant making in this land, like nothing else perhaps we've ever seen as far as covenant making goes. This was the day George Washington took his oath of office. It's the picture that we're utilizing for the cover of the book. What happened on that day, in that moment, will blow your mind. It blows my mind. First of all, a proclamation goes out a week before. Come to Federal Hall in New York City. That's where the Capitol was at the time. Come and see your president take his oath. And come ready to pray. This is the press sending this out. At 9 o'clock a.m., the bells will ring in the city. Go to your house of worship and pray that God will accept this land as his.
You're probably one of the very few, besides David Barton and me, that get teary-eyed talking about this stuff.
I get emotional. And then what happens? It's not over yet. George Washington comes out and takes his oath, raises his arm in the fashion of a covenant maker, and places his hand on the Bible, but not just on the Bible, but in the Bible. Where in the Bible? Historians muse at where he placed his hand because they think, for a deliberate man like Washington, who knew posterity was watching, why in the world did he just flip that book open and put his hand anywhere? He didn't put it just anywhere. Pat asked me about the ancient prophecies of Israel. I don't have time to explain it. You got to read it. It's better to discover it through reading the whole context of everything. Where he placed his hand told the world and the nation that he understood the covenants of Israel, and that he understood this covenant had been imported by the founders into the United States of America.
If I'm not mistaken, one other president has opened the book in exactly the same page and did exactly the same thing. Do you know this?
I don't know this one.
Ronald Reagan.
Oh.
First term.
This is a man, Ronald Reagan, who understood the covenant.
Yes. It's a guy who then got out there and said, it's an evil empire and it needs to be destroyed.
Yes. A little hint. I've found that those presidents who back Israel, I'm talking about the nation state of Israel today, always are the ones who understand the covenant. Those who don't back Israel do not understand the covenant.
Harry Truman did.
Harry Truman understood the covenant. He's in my book because he understood it so well.
Yeah.
But the day continues on April 30th. It's not over yet. Washington, after he does this thing, invokes the covenant. The people are there praying. He goes in and
Hang on, before he also added to the oath,
yes,
so help me God.
So help me God.
That was an ad lib from him.
Absolutely. He did this thing. And then he walks in and he gives what I call the smiles of heaven speech, which is what? It's an invocation to the covenant. He says, the smiles of heaven can never be expected upon a nation that disregards the rules of order and right, which heaven itself has ordained. That's a quote from this speech. He says other things, invoking the covenant. Clear invocation. Then, it's not over yet. He calls the government, the senators, the representatives, newly elected, takes them down to the street, and they walk, they march. It's a procession, a religious procession. And where do they go? Where does Washington lead them? To St. Paul's Chapel. The first joint session of Congress is now upon them.
Okay, hang on just a second. It's important to know on that walk, there were all faiths.
Absolutely.
There was everyone arm in arm. All faiths walking arm in arm intentionally. They're all walking together to worship God. All of them.
Absolutely. And
I bring this up because right now there are so many people that are like, oh, I can't. Well, no, not with you. I'm not because of that. No, they're not of my faith. That's crazy talk. Stop it. Stop it.
And this was a huge theme, what you're talking about to George Washington. He talked about it all the time, that every religious sect in this nation needs to be upheld, needs to be given their due freedom. And that was key to him and to his understanding of the fruit of this covenant, that all religions. And so he leads them in to St. Paul's Chapel, and they bow, and they pray, and they dedicate the land to God. I mean, this day is completely a religious day. It's a religious service. And we do ourselves a disservice by pretending that it was just some token acknowledgement of God that you might quote Washington here or there. No, the whole entire day of his inauguration day was the day that the covenant was further established, was recognized by the nation. And why on earth I had to dig so deep and had to find primary sources to find all this stuff? Because our historians aren't doing the job.
No, they're doing worse than that. They are erasing all of it.
They are erasing.
They're erasing all of it.
There are scholars. I get so frustrated. I start yelling. My wife has to come calm me down. I read their books, and I see ellipses, in the quote. And I want, what do you pull out? I go look at the original source. It's the focus of the statement. And it was all about God. What are we doing?
Well, you have that with the president. That all men are endowed with certain unalienable
Right.
rights. Wait, there's a ... there that, I mean, there's more dots than there are words.
We cannot take God. We cannot take God out of this nation. It's a slap in his face, and we'll lose the blessings.
Okay, so tonight I'm going to have you on, and we're going to talk about what the covenant is specifically, and how to make it again, and what we need to demand of ourselves, and also, if you will, spend some time on what page he opened the Bible to. I just showed Timothy something. Just got this yesterday. David Barton hand delivered this yesterday to me. This is what I'm holding in my hand is a Bible, and everybody says, "Oh, government it's we're not Christian nation." This is a Bible printed by the Congress of the United States of America in 1772. It is the Bible that was printed for the American Revolution. So we don't know the provenance on this particular one. This might have been in the hands of Knox. It might have been in the hands of Washington. We don't know who the hands that had this Bible, but this was the one that was given to the revolutionaries. This was for Congress. There's 8 of these in existence. Anybody who doesn't think that they cared, or that they were Christian, or that they weren't paying attention to God. We've now made this into magic tricks. We've made this into folklore and magic tricks. It's not. It's not. It's very clear. It's a simple formula. 2 + 2 = 4. You plus a covenant equals security, prosperity, peace. That's the way it is. It's just that simple. Join me tonight on gbtv.com for more with Timothy Ballard. The name of the book, again, is The Covenant, available everywhere. It's available on Amazon.com. You can find links to it at glennbeck.com. Also, we'll have more on the blaze.com coming up today, and GBTV tonight. The Covenant, a book you must get, by Timothy Ballard.